asking questions. So talk objectives, introduce 0 days and get everybody to think about them. I know the strict definition of a 0 day, we'll actually put that up there. Also going to kind of give you a few alternatives to think about that as well. I think just as a bit of a topical context thing, I don't know if anybody knows what happens here. Anybody sits under a rock for learning about 143 million records? It's like that's pretty good going.
44% of the US population.
Yeah, that's pretty good going. Like way of reach. Didn't blame the Russians this time either. Like, awesome.
And somehow also the UK and Canada was in there.
Yeah, I saw the UK 400,000, and I can't remember how many in Canada.
Something about 100,000 or something. Like that.
Do you want to guess what the background was of the CSO of that company?
Music apparently is not a good substitute for.
But she does, in her defense, work as a CSO at a previous company. I can't remember what they're called, but they were in a shitstorm as well before she left.
Yes, I did read something about that, and I'm going to not go too much into that, because that's just being. I think somebody's been kicked down. You don't need to kick them again. So basically, Apache Struts had a vulnerability as vulnerabilities come up, and so they created a patch and it was released. Somebody didn't patch. Bang, result. So that's, I mean, I think we're all familiar with what happens when you don't patch. So kind of, I think everybody's on board with patching.
There was some talk that in patching they would have had to do a serious amount of code rewrite.
It's possible. I did read up on the patch, and it was apparently the REST plugin if you're using XML, and so you had a whole bunch of choices to like. If you're not using that plugin, get rid of it. Like if you're not using that plugin with XML, disable the XML portion, like with the config change. So yes, if they were using XML and they were using the REST API, then I can imagine that they would have better work.
The March vulnerability, not the one that was released in September, the RESTful Extreme one.
Yeah. You're talking about the deserialization.
Yeah, the deserialization one is the reason. Everybody thinks it was the deserialization one.
That's the recent one, yeah.
It's actually the one that was announced in March, actually.
Yeah.
And they actually hacked in May, so they have 2 months to install.
Yeah. So that's why I've actually got these guys up as an example of not patching. So there was a patch available. So just to make that very clear.
Oh, guess what the Argentinian server's details were?
Admin. Yeah. So yeah, they're going to be in the news for a while, by the sounds of it. The CSO, the CIO, both resigned or retired.
CEO just went out today.
And the CEO today. So that's 3 C levels. That's pretty good going. It reminds me of Target as well. It's like people don't seem to learn.
ACC had the same problem.
There's just quite a few companies that have the same problem.
You'll probably get there.
Yeah, then maybe, hey, who knows? People watching your slides. Anyway, so to the definition. So it's unknown software vulnerability. So I suppose it depends on how you define software. I think unknown is quite clear. Especially Day zero has been the vendor learns of it. So if you have a piece of software and you don't know that there's a vulnerability in it, you can't fix the vulnerability because you either have to first find it yourself or somebody else has to tell you about it. This is a bit of a I'd like people to kind of get this into their heads, like the known versus unknowns. So there are unknowns out there. We'll come back to that, we'll touch on it again. But what are the implications? If there is no patch to apply, then you can't patch it, basically. So, and the workaround is the other option. Sometimes it's just disable this, a config change, and that will work. And bad actors can obviously target this vulnerability and exploit it, and then cause you lots of problems, like get hold of a whole bunch of financial or personal information of your 143 million people, and it sucks. People lose their jobs, share prices go down, etc., etc.
A lot of companies, you can mitigate your risk to a certain extent by putting it behind a WAF.
Yeah.
But
so
a lot of companies don't go to that length.
That's a fair point. I won't argue there. I think I've managed to get this in the wrong order.
They don't really trust me.
Say again?
They don't really trust me.
Yeah.
That was 2014, 2015.
But what's nice about giving talks about security, there's always a recent example. It's very strange. I don't know why that happens. It's like, I promise you I'm not responsible. It's like, say again?
Open source is the problem.
Yeah, open source, there we go. Because they can see the source code. So that actually ties in quite nicely with this slide. Talking about the race is on, because let's say that there is a vulnerability and it gets discovered and it gets reported and it's disclosed responsibility. So it goes to responsibility. So it goes to the vendor, and the vendor goes, yes, it's a problem, and they figure out how it breaks, why it's broken. They come up with a fix. They produce a patch. So then they release the patch. What happens? People take the patch. They compare the patch version to the unpatched version. They go like, okay, I see you changed this. Let's go look at that lot of code. Like, whatever it is, buffer overflow, not checking something, and bang. Then you get an exploit from that. And the time frame can be down to very short periods of time. I've read a little bit about automated reverse engineering of patches. What that tends to do is just give you the ability to crash an application. Sometimes that's very useful. If you have a server application, you crash it, and sometimes you can gain a shell or the server, etc. Depending on what that permissions that service is running as, that can be very useful. But they literally can take a binary, pull it apart, put it in a hex editor, decompile it. I mean, professionals, or even if it's on the black market side of things, like the organized crime, they can read assembly, they can write assembly. If you look at all the professional write-ups on the good side, where they're trying to do malware analysis, they're pulling it apart. You can pull apart legitimate software as well. It's very handy if you've got a patching just a little bit that you. So, attack surface, I think is a familiar concept, but it's all the bits that can be attacked, or the sum of all the parts that can be attacked. So less is more. So if you're going to run extraneous software, then you're going to have more potential for 0 days that you'd have to, and also more potential for non-0 days that you'd have to patch. So basically it's just the more you have to look after. And it's a fairly obvious one. When we talk about servers, to drill a bit more into this, you've got services. So running unneeded services is a bad thing, clearly. Protocols, your choice of protocols. You can run secure protocols or insecure protocols to HTTPS or non-HTTPS. And then you can also have different versions of protocols. We've got like the Samba version 1. I mean, that was replaced by Samba version 2. And do we have 3 out? What's the latest version? I think we're on 4 now. But when you're still running 1, and I read some of the reasons, like way back when they wrote version 2, was like, yeah, we looked at this and we decided we couldn't fix it, so we released version 2. That's kind of a sign that maybe that's not the best version of well, the people who wrote it weren't happy with it. It's like, I think that's more of a general principle, and that's one of the things I'm actually going for here. Is you've got a specific example. You've got SMB v1 was exploitable by blah blah blah. It's not the only old protocol. So there's many old protocols, just like there's many insecure versions of services. I think people have mostly got the idea that they don't want to run telnet on their server anymore. FTP seems to be slowly dying out as well. Obviously, horses for courses, publicly available software like FTP is fine, HTTP is fine. For permissions RBAC, that's just it's a general principle, like least privilege necessary to do something. And I've got hardening as like question mark as a solution to a lot of these problems, or when I say solution, I should say mitigating problems. It's not necessarily a silver bullet for anything. That's one of the things that I've been looking at. There's no silver bullet for everything. There's different classes of attacks, and we're going to look at some of the ones that have come out from the NSA as well, in very brief detail, but still interesting things. I think with hardening, you could probably also add education. Things like least privilege necessary is just really a concept that people should understand. It's not really it's a concept that needs to be implemented at a technical level. But people exercising their thoughts and their decisions, you're going like, chmod 777. And that last 7 is a problem, generally. It's like, yes, make it world readable, world writable, and world executable. Like, well, anybody can change it now. And depending on who's running it, that's a serious problem. People don't know that, people do that, and bang, problem. So hardening, I'll actually touch on some hardening guides for like routers, and not so much routers, but firewalls and things like that. But the same can be applied to servers. You guys feel free to jump in with any stories or things that make sense for what I'm talking about.
That's like, what was it, MongoDB?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the documentation gives you a hardening guide.
Yep.
Hundreds of thousands of databases are open on the internet without any kind of security.
Without having followed that guide.
Yeah. So When you set it up in the lab, the only security feature that they employ by default is making it listen on localhost only.
Yeah.
First thing anybody does in testing is turn it onto their local NIC.
Yep.
And
So
then
they
when
can
they
reach
go
it
to
from another
production,
machine. Yeah.
So you log on with no username and password. The hardening guide starts the passwording and the encryption and the security, and people go into production without doing that.
So what we're talking now is about config, and I've touched on that a bit already, and it's one of the things that I think is missing out there. It's, if you look at some of these exploits, they were getting in because people are not hardening systems, they being whoever the bad actor is, which they can then use to deploy some other exploit of theirs and gain persistence on it. What I'm talking about here is more like, again, it's still the attack surface. It differs a bit from a server or the next category which is coming up. So browsers, kind of interesting one. People always think about operating systems. I've actually put that in third place. Maybe you want to change the order, but I think that's probably pretty realistic. Web browser, email, phishing. So if you think about email and phishing, is it a training issue? So again, I'm really playing fast and loose with the definition of 0 days here. But
Still making another point.
people are a factor, right? Like, it's not just technology, and it can be down to bad config, it can be unpatched. And we're going to come to some things a little bit later about decisions that people can make, which will help mitigate and prevent 0 days that happen to you, and that's kind of the crux of the talk. And hardening, so, I mean, you can lock down an operating system, whether it's a client machine or a server, so that's pretty obvious. Email, you can pick a good client that actually pays attention to security that you're going to deploy, and browsers, the same thing. You can update them, you can put plugins in them, you can disable scripts and disable ads. Not that people on the internet or like Facebook want to hear things like that. Smartphones, great topic. Really like this one. So I was reading on about app stores, and it was Kaspersky in 2014 did a bit of study, and they estimated that, should have put the number in here now, I think it was about 98% of the vulnerabilities that affect Android come from apps in the App Store. So that's where your 0 days are coming from. It's like your users are on your network, you've got bring your own device policy, and they bring their phones in, and they're installing things from the App Store. And depending on how well that app has been scanned then and assessed, etc., there could be malware in there. And that's obviously a problem. If you look at what Android has done, actually some techniques to look at that. The one I came across was Risk Ranker. That was done as an academic paper. And they were literally saying, okay, one of the big problems here is scale. So how many apps are in the App Store? Like hundreds of thousands. Like how do you go through that manually, or how do you try and figure out which ones to concentrate? Anyway, so they came up with a set of tooling that went through 100 odd, it was about close to 120,000, 117,000 in their sample, and then it spat out about 3,500, and they looked at those 3,500, and they managed to find like 750 that were really malicious, including a good number of 0 days that nobody had ever seen before. So basically profiling the applications and looking at what they're doing is actually useful.
There was the one recently, it was a SDK that displayed adverts, and it was determined that it was phoning home with information on from your phone.
There's a nice example. Another example, one on iOS, was actually displaying the advert off the screen so that the user couldn't see it. So as far as the user is concerned, like, nothing's happening. Okay, maybe slightly higher data usage, but somebody's getting rich off all those ads that are being viewed, so that gets pulled. And literally what the people who are maintaining the app stores, i.e. Apple or Google, are doing is they're just yanking apps, and maybe figuring out who's got access to write these things and publish them is a big trick. One of the bits about that was quite interesting was if you look at Google's implemented quite a few things. If you look on their Android now, when you install something from the Play Store, then it'll say scanning this app. So they have been doing things. Part of that's rebranding. They've been doing that for quite a while. It was quite interesting to see, read the academic papers, and then look at the timeline of when Google implemented these things, and then now they try to make them more public because people don't know what's going on, and they think it's all broken and all bad. But obviously, if you're jailbreaking devices, then people can install APKs or applications, whether it's an iPhone or whether it's an Android device. If it's jailbroken, then you don't only come from the App Store, so that opens up another can of worms. So maybe if you bring your own device and it's allowed on your network, then maybe it needs to be on the guest network with internet-only access, and it can't touch anything inside the rest of the network. Or if you're issuing corporate phones, you maybe want to have some sort of policy that can check that they haven't been routed, or etc., etc. It's down to OS flaws. Obviously, you can have flaws in iOS, you can have flaws in Android. Believe it or not, there is a long list of exploits for iOS. Go to the CVEs and have a look there. There's a fairly bit longer Android one. The severity seems a bit higher. I went and had a look at the severity of the actual, the scores they assigned to them. So you could say theoretically Android is less secure or iOS is more secure. It only takes one, so weigh that up. Biometrics, that's going to be lots of fun. We've already seen things like Samsung phone, I think it was, the Samsung camera, take a picture of somebody, show the photo to it, and the camera, I suppose it is the camera in the phone, looks at that picture and says, yes, that looks right, and unlocks the phone. I played with that myself, and I was like, really? If it took that photo in that bad light of me and it unlocked my phone, I'm like, no, disable that. I was chatting to somebody, Keegan, and you mentioned that your face is who you are. It's almost like identity. It's not about security. It's not saying, it's like a username, in other words, rather than a password or passphrase or a PIN. So also the iPhone, what's it, the X version that's coming out?
No, the 10. Don't call it the X.
Oh, sorry,
that's
the
bad.
The 10.
The Apple Galaxy.
The Apple
Anyway,
Essential phone.
I believe there's a bit of a delay in the shipping. The reason it's been pushed out is they've got this Romeo and Juliet, so they call these two components. And it's actually trying to do a 3D map of your face. So that does sound more secure. It's more data points. It's more unique. Say again?
It's a dot pass or something like that.
Well, apparently use a little laser
it does like 30,000 points or something.
So that is better than it being able to put a 2D image so you've printed out of a laptop, or sorry, you use a printer and stuff.
Some infrared capability to get around that.
Yeah.
So with the Samsungs blowing up, does some of these lasers boost up in power and blind you?
Questions that will be answered once it starts shipping, right? But apparently there's been a delay because I can't remember which one. I think it's the one that's trying to read all the points on your face with the lasers pointing is hard to manufacture and hard to get the yields right. So hardware firmware hacking. So I'm thinking here like Broadporn is a very nice example. So yeah, you've got a super secure phone, and if you look at what Apple's done, they've done a lot of work into basically making sure their phone is quite hardened at the hardware level. They encrypt what's in the flash, and I think they might encrypt the DRAM as well. So actually, as things are moving, you can't just desolder the chips off the board, the flash memory, and then solder them on another board and then go and read the contents off because it's encrypted. So it's quite useful. And then you've got some, they realize, oh, guess what? You've actually also got a Broadcom Wi-Fi chip in, and somebody can run code on your super shiny Apple as well. So, and it's not just an Apple problem, it was an Android Apple problem. The point is, depending on how far down the stack you go, and I like firmware, so we're going to be talking about firmware in a bit, you can see that you can avoid the nice OS that maybe has very few flaws, or has been hardened, or the hardware has been hardened, and somebody goes for the firmware. It's kind of like the path of least resistance. It's what attackers do. So, talk about internet-facing servers. One of the things that I didn't mention explicitly, but I was talking about the patching. It was raised there that they had about 2 months to patch, I think, because you were mentioning. And what happens if the patch is released and the exploit is like 2 days afterwards, or let's say 2 weeks? What is the patch cycle in a corporate?
So give you an example, Cisco released an update yesterday, 3 critical vulnerabilities. One involves 2 web bypasses, one on the without authentication, one with authentication, then gives you privilege escalation. So you use those 2 to combine to get privileged user.
Yep.
And then the other one, which is even worse, is DHCP relay subsystem can allow remote code execution by just injecting packets that causes a buffer overflow on the device hardware.
Lovely.
Right? So to answer that question exactly, if you've got a big network to patch and to push these things through, the patch was released yesterday.
Yep.
Are you just going to blindly roll in these new updates, or are you going to follow procedure?
Yeah.
And in that time, guys, especially 2 web ones, it's easy to. They didn't give too much technical details, but they gave enough. So you can develop if you have that hardware, you can develop your own, let's say, exploit before somebody can patch it.
Now, just to make these things a little bit interesting, I worked for 11 years for Old Mutual. They patched, and they would not roll out the patch unless it's been out for 6 months.
Or patch level -1.
Including generally patch level -1.
Yes.
And it must have been out for at least 6 months.
Yes.
In any case.
Yes.
Thesis
Because-
probably made it a year.
Because probably.
That's Sunlam, isn't it?
Well, now at Old Mutual is
Oh,
not.
Mutual actually.
But Sunlam first, but yeah. Because they're committed. Roll out a patch and things go down.
Yes.
Because the patch isn't good.
Patch has changed something other than what it was supposed to change.
My background is in Solaris, and I have seen hundreds of patches being pulled back by Sun back in the days because they discovered after releasing the patch there is a bad patch.
Yeah, broke something else.
So do you patch on 0 day on a critical server? That must be up.
Yeah,
Well,
we
this
had
is
a
one of
similar problem.
Sorry?
So
No, no.
we had a similar problem on SAS, for example. So we were busy rolling out our acceptance environment.
Yeah.
So I'm busy sitting there saying, okay, we're ready for the patch, start up the servers, want to test the endpoints. Everything's broken. The machines are changed. I'm like, I have to really redo this entire installation. That takes 5 days to do. And I obviously have to now contact someone outsource.
It's late.
Yeah. So now I also then have to get InfoSec involved, I have to get this one and that one, that one. It's a huge shitstorm. So I literally told the guys, listen, you did a bad patch, fix it.
And it's this lovely word they use, mitigation.
That's exactly what happened with
We're going to talk about mitigation later. Yep, sorry.
That's exactly what happened with WannaCry. It was Microsoft released the patch.
Oh, yep.
Your typical corporate patch life cycle is a month. The exploit was in the wild before that, or Eternal Blue started raising its aggregate before that. And a lot of the companies hadn't gone through their patch cycle. First thing they do is they leave it out for a week to see if it gets pulled or not.
Yep.
They then put it into QA for a week. Then only maybe 3 or 4 weeks later does it go into production.
Yeah. It's getting scheduled, change control, all those things.
All that sort of stuff. And that takes a while. So 0 days can easily creep in.
Yeah.
So, if
yeah.
I take Equifax as an example, it was a REST API. So potentially what they could have done is use the web application firewall with some kind of regex to find a type of payload coming in that shouldn't have. So there is still mitigation. You can't necessarily patch immediately. I mean, I took 2 months upgrading Elasticsearch from 2 to 5, not because of the vulnerability, because of features, and it broke a shit ton of things in production that we had to live fix. So it's understandable, but then segmentation and some kind of like blocking has to happen, because it's the same as, so the OpenBSD guys have an interesting system called Pledge. And what Pledge does is, after they found weird vulnerabilities and stuff like GNU tools like cat, they said a program like this should only do what the guy who wrote it designed to do. So you end up giving it permissions to only call certain syscalls and nothing else. So it's not a perfect science, but there is some mitigation that you could have done, at least if you know your patch cycles and what.
Yep.
Or, I mean, Windows running SMB version 1.
How many companies there are running legacy applications that
I have some
are so old that they're incompatible?
No, but then should they be internet facing?
No.
Yeah.
mean, I've got an example just last week that SAP version 1. I won't mention the corporate, but the huge. It's not an internet-facing server, but they've got some 2003 Windows servers which they can't upgrade because the third-party vendor software that they're running on won't run on anything else. It's, they're not going to change. They still need the software. They've now got to look at how do we migrate them. There's tens of thousands of different software applications in this company. So they can't change it, they just switched it off, which means now there has to be a manual process for somebody to actually copy this, which is not particularly secure in itself. And now they're talking about maybe we should just restart, put it back because we can't run anything else. And we don't want to pay for re-engineering this. And that's the problem. They can't actually patch, and they can't upgrade the version, and they don't have that software vendor doesn't support anything else because it's now out of date. So they actually need to now look for another solution for this, which they don't really want to do either. But,
but they're prepared to take the risk.
So that's it. They have to now get into the whole thing. It's just not a patch issue. It's actually we now need to look at what do we want to do? Do we need to upgrade? Do we need to change a process of business? It's a big project now instead of actually a patch.
So I think start getting into the GRC side of things.
So one of the things you're touching on there is that, I'm not sure how many people or how many companies realize it, but a lot of companies, the entire operation is basically, if you're working with information, it's basically just IT based these days. And sometimes they've got a lot of people pushing some buttons and doing some things. They might not realize you probably don't need most of those people anyway, but the point is, overall, if you take out the IT that they're using there, the information technology, it's just going to, that process goes back to manual paper-based. So people are still viewing it as the IT budget. Meanwhile, that's your operations these days. If you're not maintaining your operations, it seems like a bad idea. It's like a lot of companies will have training for people, training budgets on, okay, you're in finance, great, go on a finance course. Okay, you're in whatever, facilities, you go to the facilities course, et cetera, et cetera. And then it comes to this thing, they're like, oh, we're not really willing to spend money to redo this thing.
I think it gets to a stage where it's actually lost in the works. IT department have forgotten about it.
Yes.
Over 10 years ago. People change and nobody's now looking after that. There's actually no one managing it. Yep. And it's like when you're trying to find out 10 third-party vendors that are supporting things. No, it's not me. Nobody supports it. It's down to like 2 or 3 users who are using it. They have no idea.
It almost sounds like you're making the case for employing sysadmins and having them use standard-based tools. The world doesn't seem to have many sysadmin jobs available. So maybe automating patching is not the way to go. It's just an idea I was throwing up there on the board to see, like the way you guys come back and say, no, probably not. We don't want to do that.
I suppose automated patching in dev is good. But when you start getting to QA and production, that's when you start wanting to, after you've left it in dev for 2 weeks, then start manually installing your patches in QA and prod, because there you start running into requiring downtime slots.
Yeah.
And you've got to have scheduled downtime slots. You can't just go willy-nilly and disrupt a QA or a prod environment. So even that takes time.
It all takes time.
I suppose that's the dev, it's likely to be reasonably up to date as well. It's not going to be an old OS or an old version of the development tool.
So that's an interesting point there, the concept of reasonably up to date. So, if you just give up, you don't patch at all, that's a very different scenario to like, okay, we're going to try and patch, but we sure as heck are not going to just throw it straight onto production. So as you can have automated upgrading of like a dev box, or perhaps a specific set of dev/QA boxes which are there to test security. And maybe you've got Metasploit or something running again, so you have automated patching to check that, yes, look, oh, it's showing red, it's not secure, and then, oh, look, the automated patching kicked in, yes, it patched it, that is at least secure now, and has maybe a separate stream to verify that. It's just ideas and things.
What do you think the best practices should be? Do you think the default should be automated naturally?
No, I would say know your threat model first.
Yeah.
Understand what your threat model is. Understand how your business and all the systems interface to each other, and then, based on the information that's available, make a decision. Then
choose the default.
Well, the default should never be automated unless it's part of your business philosophy. Most businesses have not yet adopted DevOps. I mean, I know Christo is quite active in that, but there's
But
a
even
new.
so,
there's
I will sometimes not automate the production deploy because there's some migration or some shit that can go horribly wrong because the dev didn't tell me about it. I cannot operate on perfect information.
So the evolution of DevOps is a DevSecOps, but I think that's just a natural evolution. But automated patching should be automated in removing manual aspects of deployment thereof as much as possible. The decision to roll out the patch must still be orchestrated and agreed and pushed through channels.
With whatever oversight that you decide for your business.
It is ideal, but yeah, to recover, it's always the whole thing is to recover from that. What's your recovery plan look like?
Yeah.
But coming to the security topic, I think organizations underestimate the value of a threat model. Understand what the landscape looks like. If we get hit by let's say, this eternal group problem, are we affected by it? Well, probably not, because we don't have SMBs on the outside pointing to the internet. What other alternative? Well, we could get like a malware delivered via spam. Somebody executes the malware or does a drive-by on the website, installs something then internally. But then you start looking at segmentation and stuff like that. So all I'm saying is looking at threat models. It helps to decide whether or not to automate something or not, but at what level. So
yeah.
Also,
I think that's quite a good explanation of it.
I think also, segmentation is important. Nothing should be facing the internet that shouldn't be facing the internet.
Well, this is the example of what is facing the
but
internet.
then also another thing is maybe choosing the right vendors. And even when I'm saying vendors, I'm including an open source project. So you find something that has a good life cycle. I've seen it so many times where someone has chosen some obscure project and it's not even a vulnerability, the guy just stopped maintaining it. And now what are you going to do? Now you're maintaining that. You're writing code for that stupid library that you used once and now stuck in the code base. And whatever other mitigation, at the end of the day, you can only do as much as you humanly can. After that, it's how quickly can I switch things off? Or am I monitoring things? I think we haven't actually touched on that.
Yeah, there's more to come.
Like the fact that I have to tell my boss, have you seen the Nginx logs? People keep looking for PHP MyAdmin. Now, it's not going to affect us, but it's an annoyance and I'd like to cut it out. Now we'll worry about that later. We're on a public cloud. People are scanning every day. It's a published list. There's a JSON API to get those IP.
Yeah, you're touching quite a very popular, let's say, identification of fingerprint methodology there. I mean, this new options bleed problem in Apache server. It's a bug that's been sitting there for how long? Nobody's noticed it because it only happens in a very non-deterministic way under heavy load, and only when somebody asks for the options which the server allows. But the server must be very busy. The server must have quite a huge overhead on sockets closing, and you have to issue the option method request to that server at the right time. Then you get the equivalent of what they call a bleed, like the hard bleed, where some portions of memory, depending on where that use after free pointer was pointed at, you get a chunk of memory. So it's like playing roulette. You don't know what you're going to get, but just that guy's just hammering that server. You might get something quite interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's why it's called Apache server. It's a very Apache server, but so yeah. Sorry, Liam.
No, it's good. Getting the discussion that I wanted. The other thing is I can play devil's advocate now as well. So I had some reasons to put this up here like this. So all valid talks, or all valid points. So we have constraints, right? There's a vulnerability, and exploits are going to come. It's on the internet. That means it's accessible. So it's accessible. There are vulnerabilities, and there's going to be exploits. So like, why wouldn't you be targeted? Okay, so automated patching. So we're talking about again about the speed of the patch here, because we're talking about this time window. We've got this time problem where things are ready to be patched, things are ready to be exploited. Like we've got this gap in between. How do we make that gap smaller? That's what I'm talking about. And if we look at things like hardening or designing, if we were to try and take, this is our application server and it's sitting on the internet, let's not put anything else in there that really doesn't need to be in there. Let's put as little bit as possible, running as few things as possible. Let's make it easy to patch and easy to unpatch, easy to roll back. If you can fire up an instance, or fire up two instances, and one has got the patch, one doesn't have the patch, and then let's say you've got 10 of these things, or maybe you've only got 5 of them, or whatever, you start firing up the ones with the patch, and you can monitor them, then you can slowly migrate them, and then you figure out there's a problem. So when I say migrate, I mean shut down the ones that are unpatched and spawn new copies of the patch version. So again?
Blue, green, or
yeah. So there are means and ways of achieving, some degree of faster patches, at least extremely fast patching. It doesn't necessarily mean take everything you have and change it to something else, which you then can't change back. So that's just valid concerns, maybe a potential way around it.
What happens if you keep wrapping unnecessary servers sort of behind more firewalls and stuff? Do people end up then assuming that security always is there? And one moment, like you mentioned earlier, not everyone is on the internet, and all those assumptions are something that we're wrong about it. Isn't it better just to assume that it's always going to be a public internet, well, it's secure from the start, so if somebody breaks into an app or whatever?
No, you raise a good point. I've personally been involved in a situation with a server that was definitely not on the internet, and then until it turned out it was, because there was an app rule in the firewall somewhere that pointed to an IP that had been reused. Voila, it's on the internet. Oracle's probably not the best password either. But, developers, etc. It was a dev server or QA server.
But that also...
And that was picked up by logs being monitored, by the way, which is something, another mitigation factor.
But it also speaks to change control.
There was a severe lack. There was some remediation action, specifically on the firewall side of things. There was a huge audit of all the firewall rules. I think somebody got their house in order after that.
The best way to do that is you have a system called server. CMS, a configuration management server.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
and a good commissioning and decommissioning process. And everything must be documented and the steps must be followed.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of entire lifecycle management. Yeah. Servers come up, services come up, or whatever business process created, or people are onboarded. Those people leave, those servers get decommissioned eventually, or should be decommissioned. If you just leave it there and it's powered on, it's got a network port, well, we don't use that anymore, so we don't need to patch it. Really? It's obviously a very bad idea, right? So, once it comes down to architectural, because I'm thinking the similar lines of what you guys are doing, web application firewalls. So there we go. We do listen sometimes. Compartmentalization, I think Christy mentioned this, so it's good to see that people think about these things. Literally splitting the data off from the presentation there. So if you go back to the Equifax example, how did they get to 143 million people's records from an Apache struts vulnerability? Was severe?
Just one record at a time. Multiple queries.
Yeah.
Oh,
And they left the PGP keys on the server as well.
Yeah. So they did some strange things, like using the SSN, the social security number in the US, which is what other people would call an identity number. They don't have ID numbers there, but that's the closest they've got. And they're again using something that's publicly available, like your picture of your face, and using that as authentication, which is just silly. So don't do that either. But for example, there have been other vulnerabilities where if we just split the data off, and put that behind a firewall, and the thing that springs to mind obviously is PCI DSS, the payment cards industry data security standard. They're very big on, okay, so that's your web server serving up pages, or your application server talking to another application server. this is your data. In between, there's like firewall on this host, another firewall there, and this is being monitored and checked and whatever. So you know what's happening between this and this. So if somebody breaks in there, A, you'll know about it. B, it doesn't mean they get all the data. They can get maybe what's on that server at that time, but it's busy processing.
Yeah, I know some payment card companies that from their offices to get into the databases and the front-end applications, you've got to go through an intermediary DMZ that has a bunch of terminal servers on with two-factor authentication. So you've got to get a jump box before you can even get into the network.
But you know what the problem is with that? Exactly what he was talking about is that some admin goes, I'm so sick and tired of this shit, and puts a route straight.
Well, not even that. The banks just email card numbers and they're clear when they do fraud detection. Because they don't follow procedure themselves. So you do all that security, and then the guys in the back office just mail stuff and clear around.
You've got the human factor basically.
Yeah.
Isn't email secure?
Well, if you're running it over TLS, yes.
You can secure it. It wasn't made with security in mind at the beginning, and
It's not secure by default.
Yeah.
So
Well, by design. Yeah. Defense in depth. We were talking about firewalls earlier, chaining firewalls together. I'll come back to firewalls a little bit later. This is more of the concept though of assume that things are going to go wrong. Assume that bad things are going to happen. Assume that somebody is going to get onto your network, or more likely somebody who is already on your network legitimately is going to start doing illegitimate things, i.e. the disgruntled employee, for example. Or maybe the sales guy from the other company that is visiting you and starts
Walks into the office, plugs into the network.
there we go, that sort of thing. So it's kind of a nice escalation, really. Very quick, very easy, and if you've really got access to something and you start putting information you shouldn't be. So again, this is more like mitigating classes of 0 days. So when you get hit and something breaks, the data is separate, so they have to break more than one thing. Hopefully your application server doesn't have the same vulnerability that maybe your database server has, and then obviously it's not going to take much longer to repeat the process of cracking into that. Web application firewalls can do a lot, and I'm sure there's a config mistake somewhere, or you've missed one, etc. But it helps, and it's kind of raising that bar of security. Like that wall gets higher and higher. Like people who want to get over it need to go higher and higher, and hopefully you've got more and more chance of spotting them as well. Specifically, if you do something like deploy an IDS or an IPS, the intrusion detection system or intrusion prevention system, this one is just going to drop the connection sitting there like on your firewall and say like, no, we don't like this traffic, break the connection. This one will be reporting, detecting and monitoring, just let you know what's happening. So the idea behind this is knowing what's happening, and I've spoken before about that. The condensed version is that if you have something happen that you couldn't defend against because it is a 0 day and there is no patch, at least when you see the traffic going out and it's, why am I contacting some server in some country on some strange port, etc., etc., that doesn't fit my normal traffic profile, or it looks like it's traffic to a command and control center of a botnet, then this can kick off with their rules or heuristics or whatever they're using.
Oh, don't worry, it's just your browser Bitcoin mining.
It might be a useful thing to know. I mean, you can instrument a lot of things. You can actually instrument, what's the CPU usage. If you start, I don't want to get into leaking and leakage attacks to figure out SSL, because I spoke about that previously. But looking at how busy the CPU is, or what's the power usage, etc., the power draw, kind of gives you feedback. So,
yeah, apparently Hardening has been doing that a lot lately.
Yeah, I saw all that. That's
Yeah,
right.
if you use the website, if you go to the site, you start all of a sudden seeing your RAM and CPU running out. Especially if you have a very powerful card, it just goes bananas.
Didn't actually dig into how they did that. I think I read JavaScript.
Yeah, JavaScript, yeah.
But it was like, really?
Yeah, no,
you could do a lot of JavaScript. I was kind of like, impressed / incredulous at the same time.
Like the AdBlock plugin for Chrome, there's now a minor blocker plugin that if you go to those sites that pops up, hey, we just blocked this mining script.
Oh,
Because it's a specific company developing an SDK that they've brought into their site. So it's easy to block because they have to point it at their wallet address and shit like that.
Yeah. So probably some of the more interesting bits to talk. So stockpiles. So one of the things that this tells us is that there definitely are 0 days out there, and people are actually sitting on piles of these things and using them. So, Sivia?
Intel ME.
Yeah, I don't have a slide on that one, but I've been reading a lot about it and logging some tickets, etc., for IT to fix some stuff. So,
What's that about, sorry?
the Intel Management Engine.
Management Engine.
Well, you've
Pretty
actually got
much
a
every CPU company in the world does not publish the full list of instruction sets that you can execute. They give you a handbook of things that you as a developer can use in your compiler or whatever. So they found some ones that obviously the NSA asked for to switch certain things on and off once they got it into a system to prevent it from getting kicked out or from someone noticing faults on the system.
Well, I'll talk about the Intel Management Engine a little bit more broadly, not about specific like exploits. I'm not up to speed on that. So if you have a computer, like for example a laptop or PC, and it's got this CPU in there, if you look at how, I mean 80X motherboards have been around for a long time versus 80, and basically there's power on that board all the time. So that means the CPU has power. You get these features like wake on LAN. So that's an example of where Intel Management Engine, I'm not saying that is Intel Management Engine, it's just an example. Remote control.
3G card on the laptop.
Yeah, so you can turn things on remotely. So the Intel Management Engine will actually hook into your network card, and then you can actually access, for example, like this laptop is a corporate laptop, and it comes with Intel Management Engine. It's meant to make it easier for IT departments to go like, yep, we need to get onto that machine, find out where it is, power it on, power it off, or reboot it or something like that for patching, etc. And that code is running below the operating system, so it's like good fun.
Yeah, lowering 0.
Yeah. So again, like I was saying earlier, like just going lower down. Like so, you've got a nice hardened, operating system, and like just run some firmware below that. How do you see that? I suppose there's network traffic. Could be one thing because it's going to talk across a network.
But if you're on the hardware already, you can circumvent the network stack.
No, I'm talking about there's a network card. So for this thing to communicate somewhere else,
Sure,
so you'd catch it on.
You might have your own network stack talking to the network cards. You might actually circumvent.
Yeah, but I mean, as it goes across the network, it's going to hit a switch and a router.
Sure.
And that's what
I thought you meant on the machine itself.
No, that is the problem. You can't actually take it on the machine. So the solution there is, okay, let me get off the machine. Let me look at what this machine is doing. So again, like lots of interesting things going on. So unless you were living under the rock again, hacking team, the Italian company, the NSA, and the CIA. I'm going to leave off these two, just because these guys are still coming out. What they've been up to, some very interesting things though. Hacking team, it's getting a little bit old. NSA has got a nice 50-page A&T catalog. I've just picked 3. So iRate Monk, hard drive firmware. So who thinks this is like a nation-state only thing? Any hands? Any takers?
Thinks it's a one.
You need to be a nation-state actor in order to be able to pull this off. Any hands? Any takers?
APT. What's it? Fancy Bear? What these guys call these days? Dancing Bear?
Whatever you want to blame.
Easier
I'm going
to
to buy
Okay.
because I want to.
There we go. Cool. We'll go to look at that one in a bit more detail. Gopher Sim Toolkit. I'll just talk about that one in a second. And JetPlow. So we're also going to look at that one in a bit more detail. So we'll start with Gopher because I don't have slides for it. So you have a phone, and on the GSM system, it has a SIM card. That's part of the specification. So you've got the IMSI and you've got the IMEI. IMEI is on the phone, and the IMSI is on the SIM. And together, those kind of form the identity slash device that the network will talk to. And on the SIM, you've got some well, you've got a little bit of CPU and you've got some storage and it's a tiny little computer. So again?
64K is in storage.
And up 128K I've seen. Like, no problem, I'm sure you can get. And you can run little bits of Java on there. And I recall having a conversation in, well, it was more than 7 years ago, from a developer at a large telco explaining to me that, yep, you can run code on the SIM card and make it do things. So, just saying, apparently the NSA knows this too. And you can control the phone and make it do things. Whether that's, I don't know, send an SMS, for example. Maybe with the geotag, where you are, you know, I don't know, whatever you want to do, really. So, in a nutshell, you've got a nice secure phone, and it's running a nice secure operating system. You don't even have a firmware problem on this phone. It turns out you have a problem in your phone. So it's just one of those things. Don't take your phone if you're going to do something you don't want people to know you're doing. Yeah, carry on.
SS7.
Yeah, the signaling protocol. Do you know any stories about that?
Not recently, no.
Okay.
Wasn't there a bank in Hamburg that got ripped off by people intercepting SS7 signals for one-time passwords?
Yes.
That's what was the first field proven.
Well, yeah, in South Africa there's been quite a big problem with syndicates targeting phones and specifically SIM cards and doing things like SIM swaps to get basically around the two-factor auth that banks were doing. And the banks were using OTPs, one-time passwords, over SMS messages to the phones. So they do a SIM swap, and the person has got their phone still in their pocket with the original SIM there, and they don't get the message because the network has swapped over to using the SIM that they've given to the criminals.
Isn't this related to this whole...
The rogue unit of the SARS.
Oh, no.
Well,
Allegedly.
Well, there was a device that somebody imported, I think, under some auspices, and it's something called like a Dragon device or some, yeah. And this device could create a rogue access point that cell phones would connect to. So you go park
like
next to the guy that
emulate a cell tower, basically.
It pretends to be a cell tower. So you go park next to the guy, and his cell phone suddenly thinks, oh, there's a stronger signal coming from here. I'll connect to this instead.
Just go to DEFCON.
Yeah, where the cell phone towers just double in a weekend.
So
it's not difficult for the banks to switch to using something like Google's Authenticator. I mean, I think
hopefully they use their own and not Google's.
Right,
Well,
so the biggest
even
problem
if
with
you
that is that's not ubiquitous yet, especially in countries like that.
But even if you don't write your own, I think it's Slack uses Google's Authenticator. So there is a plugin, and it can't be too different.
But doesn't Google's Authenticator just use the RFC standard for that protocol?
Yes.
It's not. It's just the implementation of it. It's not like
It's just you just have to be able to call invoke a URL
Yeah.
afterwards with the challenge request.
But you don't want to install 50 different authenticators for all the services you subscribe.
no, but technically there should be like a one, or any of them should work if they're using the same standard. Like I use OTP, which is an open source variant, works with all the same ones. But yeah, I mean the biggest problem there would be that not everybody in the country has a smartphone. So how do the banks, is it better to have an SMS with a two-factor authentication as opposed to having nothing at all?
You should have an option.
it might be nice to be configurable.
You should have the option.
You should, yes, that's true.
Yeah, the problem is I think NIST even issued a official notice that two-factor authentication OTPs over SMS is no longer a federal standard.
Yeah.
And
I
the
did
big
read.
reason for that is because of number portability. They don't know if that number has been ported to a virtual phone provider, which means it's no longer going through a federal carrier, but through a virtual carrier that routes over, you don't know which network.
Yeah.
So that's a big problem. So the best, the alternative is
Just a question. I seem to recall that the connection between the handset and the GSM tower is encrypted.
Correct.
But the rest of the connection is not.
It's more optional.
Yes, that was it. It's optional to encrypt the rest of the. It's only the last mile that's always encrypted.
We can talk about the last mile a little bit more quickly if you want.
No,
So-
4G, everything's TLS now.
Yeah, 4G. But
So
how much still
3G
happens over
used to
2G
be
and
able
3G?
to kick it down
A lot.
to unencrypted. But 4G, I think by default you have to have it encrypted.
That's correct, yes. Yes, I read that.
But then there's also how are you encrypting it? So I'm not talking about the 4G now, it's the slightly older ones.
Easy catches and all of those things also work is not only do they have the strongest signal, but they actually check and kick your device off, giving them more access. Otherwise, afterwards they have to post-process the data that they got.
So back on the slightly older generations of GSM, then you also had different encoding options. One of them was like, you may as well not bother. One of them was actually fairly strong, and one of them was like, yeah, a little bit of effort and you're going to crack this. So you can guess which country's got which there. But to hard drive firmware. So individual actor, one guy, with a bit of reading on the internet and some skills. It's his name, Dalberg 2013, so not even recently. He gave a talk about this as well, explaining how to do it, release some code, open source. Not all of it, he did hide or keep some of it to himself, the code. It allows to inject code, allows persistence. You can do this via software, so you don't need hardware physical access to the hard drive. Not bad for one guy, so makes you start to wonder like, yeah.
Am I going to need to patch my hard drive now?
So, do we need to blame state actors for things going wrong? I don't know, probably not so much. Firewall firmware, this is a JetPlow example. So literally modifying the PIX or the ASA firmware, getting a persistent backdoor on there. They typically get on via another exploit, and that remote exploit get on there. This is the persistence because they're actually changing the firmware on it.
Yep. One ASA?
Second?
ASA?
Oh, ASA is Adaptive Security Appliance. So Cisco's bigger firewall. X is the small one.
It's like Encoding steroids.
Well, I mean, you can end up doing firewalling on it. You can do VPN on
Caching.
it. You probably can. I know it does talk to proxy servers. I can't remember if it runs the proxy
It
on there.
does too much.
Yeah, I was going to say that the next thing it does can do IDS as well. You get modules that you plug into it.
Does HA as well?
High availability, you mean? Yeah,
Yeah,
you can actually have multiple ones.
And it's 90p as well. Really good provider as well. So you have like the whole Cisco authentication.
Yes, it can talk radius as well, and then you can do authentication over it.
Like I
So,
said, it does too much.
yeah. So, just out of interest.
Compartmentalization there is not in the box.
Well, I mean, so how should we do this? I mean, should we firewall our firewalls? Just to go back to the earlier questions. Starting to worry if it's fools never differ or great minds think alike at this point. But, so maybe an inline firewall. I was reading up some of the discussions about the JetPlow on Bruce Schneier on security and what people were suggesting on how to figure out what's going on. If you've got encrypted traffic versus unencrypted traffic, you can look at the entropy of the traffic to figure out what it is. These are some of the Cisco's actions that they take to actually make this difficult. So they've got code signing with the asymmetric keys, the secure boot process, trying to make sure that it boots up and doesn't have modified code being run. Cisco's got a nice integrity assurance document because it was only released in 2016, so don't ask me what happened before that.
The problem.
Sorry?
Sorry. The problem with inline firewalls and firewalls within firewalls, your legitimate traffic still has to get through to an endpoint. And if that endpoint or that web server strat is insecure, no matter how many firewalls you have in the middle, it's still going to get through unless you have a way of mitigating.
In this case, I'm talking about the vulnerabilities in a firewall. So how would you detect those? So I'm not saying it's to detect the endpoint. I'm like, how do you make sure your firewall is doing what you think it is? So anyway, you've got the ASA, you've got the image file verification, and you can verify the integrity of other software because you don't, like you mentioned, there's a lot of things. You actually put the VPN client software on there. Yeah, I mean, if somebody fiddles with that, well, that's the other end that you're talking to. Might be easier to start sniffing passwords or credentials. And runtime memory integrity, which is quite cool. Basically, grabbing the RAM and checking what's going on. A whole bunch of checks from a lot of logs, the actual booting information. If you plug into an ASA and you boot it up, it really does tell you a lot of what it's doing. The ROM monitor information as well. Well, install the actual software if you've messed it up terribly. You mentioned HA, got failover events. I mean, let's say you've got a nice big network and you've got two of these ASAs. Let's say it fails over. Like, why is it failed over? Like, did you fail it over? As part of an upgrade process? Fair enough. We understand that. We know why there was a change race, etc. But the long story short is we know what's happening and why it's happened. If you're having failovers between there, I'd be very worried. Like, that you can't explain. Somebody's probably fiddling with something. Like, I don't know, changing the code on this one and then making sure that we're running on this one rather than that one. Because there is a lot of things happening on ASA, they suggest you go check the SSL VPN portal code as well, and etc. etc. This I like. It's the actual config that you're running on there, because obviously making changes to the config, for example, the firewall rules. If somebody was to change that, the device doesn't have a 0-day, but we're back to config. If you go and break the config on a device, it no longer does what you think it's doing. So in this case, it might not be blocking a certain type of traffic, or it might be allowing it from a different IP range. So check something in the actual config, and exporting that and then monitoring that for changes would be a good idea.
So ASA is probably not the right use case for this, but using something like Terraform with any virtualization technology, you're doing infrastructure as code, so everything's written out, stored in a repo. Not just that, you're keeping a state file of previous configuration. So the chances of you screwing it up with a code review, with a state file, are mitigated. When I look at these like enterprise things, I always feel like there's some poor admin that just has to remember how it was, or how it's going to be, and then you look at all these tools and like you could literally save that guy's life.
So, I mean, way back in enterprise, again, like more than about 7, probably longer, about 10 years ago, I was already hearing the guys doing server administration on Unix and saying like, okay, we make our code changes to an etc file, etc whatever, and we just check it into the repo. So they actually were using like source code versioning control tools to do their config management there. So it's an old and a new idea as well, which you can also do with things like switches, just not even your firewall. You can say, just back my config up here. And if you back your config up and you do a checksum, and you're backing up to a server, and that you're actually checking them into some sort of code repo, because you can't quite export them and do an SVN or git check or git push, I should say. Then if you have a little script there going, just running the file system, sorry, like a hash sum check and saying like, oh, it's changed. Let me update the version and send an email to say like, this has been changed.
Tripwire is a good example of that, so you can image
that is the concept.
Your entire directory, set the logs and stuff like that, and every time you do an upgrade, check Tripwire again.
So, and this is literally what Cisco wrote, like copy and paste it, but just change the wording slightly. This I like, it sounds good. I mean, it's like deeply committed, cybersecurity, defenses, best in class, and was it protecting confidential information, and continually like making it better.
Can I be cynical?
Please do.
That sounds very deja vu. If you watch the PR release of Equifax, that's more or less what the CEO said.
Well, that's very interesting, because it was actually what these guys said. It's like, if they did say that, then it's even more interesting. Maybe Deloitte was their auditors.
And the scary part is of Deloitte. Gartner rated them this year for the first time running the best IT security consultancy in the world.
$1,000 a day per pen tester from Deloitte.
I'm in the wrong business.
Yeah.
No, so that's the fee they charge others.
I don't understand. I'm just.
We've got good insurance.
Was it Equifax that said they don't think the insurance will cover everything?
And they offered you security, like credit security.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it's
I didn't get protection, yeah.
For 1 year.
1 year and then you start paying for it.
Just by the way, we've got
So
three of those companies in South Africa.
so their earnings are going to go up in a year's time.
But in saying that, the new company they've opened to give you the credit monitoring uses 3 independent agencies. One of them is them, but there are 2 others as well. So it's not just relying on themselves, they're relying on others as well.
Anyway, so Deloitte had the email crack, as I'm sure everybody knows. Not quite as big as Equifax. I suppose they're quite happy that Equifax is taking most of the the spotlight. Admin account apparently only had a password, just one password, no two-factor auth, nothing. So,
That was on the ECP side, on the exchange control panel. So they, you know where the /OWA is?
yep.
So you just say /ECP, and you have admin. If you have an admin or a user that has exchange global privileges with a weak password, then you just enter.
That's what happens. So this is a 0 day. Like it's kind of got the same impact though. If you think about it, like again, getting a little bit like somebody else we know likes to go on what do you call them? Philosophical tangents. So yes, it doesn't meet our strict definition. It's not a software problem. But again, like you can have the best software in the world if you've got.
It's not something you can patch.
Correct. But it's not all
You
about
can train.
patching, right?
Human 2.1.
You can train.
So maybe it's education, maybe it's training, maybe it's
It's also
policies, maybe it's have
electron
two-factor auth.
It's also electron moving.
Yeah.
You just have to move
What
it out the building.
everything is electrons move, even you sitting there.
I thought that was his point, but anyway.
0 days the user.
If you have poor config, then that can become the thing that's going to hurt you, not just the unpatched vulnerability. Just like you've got people doing really silly things, it's going to hurt you. Just like if you don't have good policies to say, you know, like actually lock down admin accounts, like make them hard to get into. Like, I mean, who knows about direct root login versus you can't log in directly as root? I mean, it's a similar principle.
That's more cyber hygiene, if you look at it like that.
It is.
I mean, like, it's about, you know, your parents teaching you to wash your hands before you eat.
Yes.
It's not necessarily inventing awesome.
No, it's not really something possible.
You could
It's not technically 0 day. I just thought it was kind of interesting to say
It has the same effect.
that was the interesting part. That was the bit that got me. It was like, it's interesting. Like, it isn't a 0 day, but you've still got a problem where it's been sitting there all along, and then it bites you. So what could you have done to prevent you getting bitten? Is the question that I like to keep asking.
Yeah, so coming back to that Apache options bleed problem, the problem is you don't have to patch the software to fix it, because what happens is in the HT access file there's a limit directive. If you configure the limit directive like get, put, head, or something like that in there,
Yep.
or post, that's either misspelled. Let's say you've put delete in there, or put
Yeah.
misspelled, whatever the misspelled.
Missing an E or
typo,
something.
Typo,
yeah,
whatever.
typo. Yeah.
That triggers that bug action. But just fixing the typo or correctly putting the correct values, you've bought yourself some time and you're not exposed.
You've mitigated or you've worked around.
So it's mitigated. But then in this case, you're talking about credentials. So that's where I think where I'm seeing a bit of a different. So one is a software flaw.
Yep.
The other one is actually more a configuration or a lack of best practice.
So I'm kind of going software. Is the traditional 0 day. Config, one of the interesting things about you have a 0 day and the vendor says, oh, well, we don't have a patch for this just yet, but like you really want to disable this if you're not actually using it because there's a problem here. You know, like that's kind of what they can say, and then until you, or maybe you can't apply the patch because of whatever reason, like it was going to take you a month. But in the meantime, you can go like, oh, we're not using this, disable that module. Same thing. Don't have passwords.
Well, what
But
happens then?
I understand what you're
That
saying.
or only a password.
I understand what you're saying. The 0 day effect is here because you don't even know you have this weakness.
Yeah.
That's the overlapping part of it.
I think we can also look at like it from a perspective of a single point of failure. This is a single point of failure. A password on a account. If it was a password and two-factor, then you have to get the two-factor auth as well and break it. So just like if you have a 0 day with a patch, sorry, that will end up with a patch to fix it because it's a code problem. Maybe if you had a web application firewall, you'd be okay. Maybe if you'd at least put the data somewhere else, you'd have mitigated the attack. Yes, your web server is still going to get hacked, but they get the web server, they don't get all the data. So it's that kind of thinking that I'm
The problem with, if we can take it back to 0 days, that if you have some kind of admin account offered a 0 day with remote execution, at least needs some auth to execute the 0 day. So then once you have that, you've got full access, because a normal, well, if we say an admin, it could be a low-level admin or a CMS.
Well, this is remote code execution of an unprivileged user and then gain privilege. And, I mean, it's typical Escalate, right? Leverage, leverage, leverage.
But I mean, just on your definition of zero day, I mean, any system that you implement, it has multiple components. It has, code, it has different servers, different blocks of code, it has people, it has process. So that whole altogether has to be, secure. So a fault, an unknown fault and a zero-day fault anywhere in that system is a problem. Whether it's the code or the processes that they're defined around it, it still applies to that system, and it's still a zero-day, whether it's a line of code or it's a process that somebody does, an actual human. You could argue that it's still a zero-day problem because it's an unknown, it's a unknown security issue within that.
Yeah, and you can look at from the impact side of things, can take your business down, can ruin your reputation. So there are unknowns. For example, in the system, we don't know that there is a software problem, or a config problem, or a human problem, the password problem. Doesn't mean you can't prepare, is what I'm trying to say. Doesn't mean you can't have monitoring to say that, oh look, this admin account is like logged in to the web-based. They had it sitting in Azure, I think Deloitte with their email, but not Azure's fault, but the weak password. Like, why is this guy logging in from somewhere else, like the wrong IP address in the wrong geographic location?
Generic token.
Yes. Why is he logging in at a strange time? Like when he never logs in, etc. Maybe admins shouldn't be able to log in directly. But again, yes, you can't type sudo because it's a web-based application. It doesn't have sudo, but that kind of concept. So if you had monitoring, you might have picked it up. If you had two-factor auth, you might have prevented it. If you had good password policies, you might have prevented it. I mean, I don't actually know if it was a weak password or somebody leaked the password or, but
it's the problem of scale as well. The company has got 238,000 employees all over the world.
Probably more than one or two admins as well.
Multiple branches, multiple locations. I think the problem that was in the Tennessee, one of the Tennessee offices or something.
It was a US office.
Yeah, it was a US office, I think, in Tennessee.
Was it Virginia?
Something, one of the states.
Yeah.
But it was an isolated office, and then from there. So it's not the whole worldwide Deloitte. But the problem is this company's got a $38 billion yearly annual turnover. Now, and it's an auditor, etc., etc. So I think that the problem here is just because one site got compromised, now all of a sudden people are poking holes in it. And that's where this problem comes in. This comes back to that reputation. One site probably didn't follow procedure. And that one site probably was like a little tiny thing somewhere backyard, not really prominent, and somebody found this. And this is where this problem of reputation risk comes in. If one, no matter how good everything else is, there's one weak link, everything.
You're known for your last mistake, not your previous success.
So the problem here with them is that it just takes one person not to follow procedure or best practice or whatever and screw the whole brand.
So you're raising a good point though. So the next question to that is, why is it possible for them to not follow procedure? If you build an automated system that enforces the policy and procedure, if you look at Google, for example, and their email, if I start messing around and I hop on a VPN and I pop out the VPN on the other side of the world, like in the UK, I can promise you it suddenly asks me, you tell me, so it doesn't ask me, it tells me I need to re-authenticate. Because it's like, we saw you logging in like 5 minutes ago on the other end of a very large continent, and now 5 minutes later you're there. That's not possible, right? It's like, so they're looking at a whole lot of things, and then if you look at your phone, they trust your phone a bit more because it's a personal device, and if your phone goes overseas, it works on the other side without asking you to re-authenticate. Also, there's probably a reasonable amount of time that you've been offline, and you probably knows that you booked it because it's probably in your calendar as well, which is a bit scary, but it's those sort of systems though that you can be put in place. As you say, if it's like just a written on a piece of paper or even in an electronic document saying thou shalt do this and thou shalt do that, people make mistakes, people forget. People don't change the passwords after that, they kind of use the same password on that website, which, that website got cracked, like probably should change all your passwords if you were sharing them at that point. I don't recommend sharing passwords.
Yeah.
Password managers.
The issues I've come up with, come up against in Google, for example, the Google Apps Suite. Can you please reset our account because we left our phone at home today? Right, so why don't you use your backup password? Oh, we've got to print.
People.
Guilty of that before.
Yeah, I think that's also was it the SEP? Someone else's problem. If you can make it somebody else's problem, you do.
Yeah.
So, you know, as people. So users are like that, and they'll be like, yeah, nah, I can make it IT's problem. So they do. If it was only them versus Google, like it was an individual account, and they were going to go overseas, etc., on a holiday, they didn't want to get locked out of their email, you can be sure they'd print those passwords and make sure, like, because what are they going to do, right? They can't phone IT and make it IT's problem. Google's not going to say, like, we're going to just give you access to this account.
So that exact example, I mean, I was a couple of years ago, I was going on a trip to Germany, and the problem I had was going over there and then being able to, let's say, get a SIM card and then get online, and then from there on you've got data, and then you can use your smartphone again. My problem was that I had to get into my, because I used Airbnb back then, and I had to get into my accommodation by simple time. And if it wasn't for the fact that I had my Google recovery keys with me, because I went to a kiosk and I used, you know, probably not a bright idea, but I was desperate, so I used one of my recovery keys to get into my Google account because I was not able to get otherwise access to my phone was useless.
Phone's got no data.
Yeah, so I used that, and then you got that access. So the problem is you use the tools that were given to you for a reason. So temporary recovery stuff, and then obviously after that you have to clean up afterwards. But the point is that there are ways and means to use the systems if they are designed correctly. Like in the case of Google has done quite a good job of that. But then you come back to the Deloitte. I mean, I don't know if you've read about the SEC's problem, the Security Exchange Commission in America. They also disclosed a data leakage that was probably just as bad, but nobody seemed to have cared about it because it just involved the stock market, where there was a leakage, an extreme leakage of filings at the SEC, and it's been going on for more than a year, that they just never disclosed it to anybody. Where
I'm going to complain if my stock portfolio is just doing really well.
There's a possibility that people have been using that leaked information for insider trading.
Yep.
But because they never disclosed the information, nobody knows. So coming back to good practices, I mean, GDPR and stuff is coming in 25th of May next year. So this type of things where there's an exploit that hit you and you lost data, you have 72 hours to disclose it under GDPR, and you have to inform the people affected. There aren't enough companies. The companies out there aren't ready for that.
Yep.
And I don't want to be a CIO or CSO or anybody after the 25th of May in Europe. The problem here is now, Britain is still part of the whole EU until they finish their Brexit stuff.
Yep.
So GDPR is applicable to them. What people didn't mention in the Equifax stuff as well is the fact that there's something called the Privacy Shield Agreement between Europe and America. Last year, the Safe Harbor Agreement lapsed. Safe Harbor Agreement was where the European Union forced America to give their citizens the same data protection privileges that's present in Europe, must also be enforced by companies in USA. That's why so many of these guys you see, especially Germany and France, are going after Facebook and Google for certain data usage practices. Now, the Safe Harbor Agreement was an agreement that was reached to breach the gap for the Safe Harbor. But Equifax is not listed as a participating member on that list of the Privacy Shield, because you have to be a participating member to be part of that. And under that, you have got certain privileges. Now, Equifax has got about 400,000 UK citizens' data apparently. But
Yep.
that was apparently done through British Telecom, British Gas, and another one corporate, one capital or something.
So a few large ones.
So those guys are apparently the clients of Equifax or one of their subsidiaries. Now the only recourse for that is to go after British Telecom and British Gas and one capital.
And let them go then after Equifax.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the point what I'm saying is, like, coming back to the original point, is that if there are policies and procedures people don't follow, there should be repercussions.
Well, if there are no repercussions, then what's the point of following it? Because following things like rules, or in this case policies or procedures, normally involves more effort, takes more time, there's a cost associated.
And I think
So unless there's another cost that makes you go, I better do this.
And there was a point raised earlier, I don't know, I think Krista raised this, like as soon as you add more layers or more security, people start circumventing it because it makes their job more difficult. And that's where the balance, I think, of good security comes in. You can never have enough security, but the point is you can have too much security, people just like either work around it or they will just totally disable it.
I would prefer if you reworded that to you probably can have enough security, and secondly it's the effort that people have to go through to be whatever secure is the problem. It's not the degree of security, it's how much effort.
We live in the world of 2-minute moves and Instagram and stuff like that.
Convenience is always the trade-off.
Yes.
Yep.
Not having to enter a password or authenticate is more convenient than having to authenticate, but it's less secure.
It's called user experience. And the problem with that is that people, especially the end user, the person that bought this phone never bought it for security or privacy. They bought it because they want to share images of their dog with their family or whatever.
They want a shiny new phone to show.
But but people don't understand. And I think education goes a long way. Especially in South Africa, we don't have a lot of education when it comes to privacy. And Europe is a lot better at it. And I think end user awareness is more important for me than actual physical security, because physical security, it should always be there. You have burglar bars, you have locks.
But obvious in the real world.
End user education. I mean, now again, this Locky ransomware. They don't even use internal blue of that stuff. The easiest way for them to distribute ransomware
Phishing
is
email.
spam.
Yeah, phishing emails,
Phishing.
spam emails, whatever.
And they're successful in it.
Yep.
Did anyone see the latest ransomware that asks you for naked pictures?
In ransom, yeah. 10 pictures apparently, minimum.
I don't know, but my ransomware threat on Twitter was scrolling today. It was a scroll. Well, I don't even know what's going on.
It's the new currency.
So a lot of what we've been talking about is applying patches when they become available, right?
It's one of the things, just because that's the typical definition of a 0-day. It's like a software vulnerability. How do we fix those with a patch?
Yeah.
And I was trying to inculcate or get some people thinking about other ideas, like architecture, for example.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I've got a question now. So as a software vendor who is providing patches, right?
Yep.
So if you're a vendor and you sort of ship your products, maybe it depends on third-party libraries.
Mm-hmm.
So you ship those as part of your product. But maybe you depend on, say, 30 libraries, let's say, as part of the set. Now those from time to time, maybe every few days or every few weeks, maybe a new update becomes available.
On the library, yeah. Or one of the libraries, yeah.
Is there like a best practice of what, should it be should be the end where on the installed site that they must update it, or does one as a vendor keep supplying new?
I can give you, well, I want to ask one question first. What is the platform that you're on? Is it a Unix platform, a Linux platform, a Windows platform? Is it an Android? Is it what is it?
Yeah, not Android, it's like a Linux, Linux or Windows.
Okay. So for Linux, you've got package management, and one of the reasons they break out the libraries is for the very reason you've spoken about. You've got like image processing library and your image, image displaying program, like whatever, to look at photos or gallery program, needs that library and gets libjpeg. And oh look, the browser needs libjpeg as well. So when libjpeg has a problem, it gets patched and fixed. The next question would be, is it like a black box at the customer site? So they're running, second?
From the customer's perspective, yes.
Yeah, then you need to kind of own them. I mean, I don't think they'd have a mechanism to be able to update the libraries individually then. If you see what I'm saying? They wouldn't be able to patch the libraries. When you say black box.
Correct. Yeah, they wouldn't know how to actually maybe change the.
Well,
So then,
depends on a couple of things. So first thing is you can track things like CVE numbers for vulnerabilities to specific libraries, to specific versions. So unless there's no known vulnerability, you should
This
be
is a
okay.
full-time job for a team.
I know, but like to give an example, once again, something like Elasticsearch, between versions it changes so much that the library and the system itself breaks call backwards compatibility. So to do running updates of every third party is not going to happen. It's impossible.
So the problem with that is, I understand exactly your question. I come from the previous job I had was for a company, a software vendor that created fintech software. So we were subject to PCI PA DSS. And under PCI PA DSS, for example, it is the vendor's obligation to manage any third-party dependency and to inform clients of third-party dependencies that have vulnerabilities in it. If it is, for example, even as silly as the operating system that I depend on to run on, I have to inform the client there is a vulnerability. If it's a database server, I have to inform the client. For instance, I don't have to give them the patch. I just have to inform them saying there is a vulnerability reported, and I have to let the client say, well, you have to work this into your patch cycle. If it is on software that I depend on, for instance, we dependent on Java, Oracle, release quite a lot of critical CPEs, patch updates and stuff like that. We have to put out a quarterly or annual update, at least once or twice a quarter, to indicate to the client these are vulnerabilities, these are the patches, and it becomes the vendor's responsibility on the PA DSS to manage dependencies you directly link into it. So you have to understand in which context it normally is used. If there's a legal requirement from, let's say, contract point of view, if there is a industry requirement, etc. But most of the time, I think, if it's loosely coupled, like Crystal was saying about the Linux environment, then yes, it can be out of your hands. But then once again, depending on the patch management, is it just security fixes or is it feature fixes? So, but I think from where I come from, I would always say it's always the vendor's responsibility to inform the client about it.
And to provide the client with
Yeah.
an update.
It is, unfortunately, and coming to this gentleman's point, it is a full-time job, and that's why there's a good money to be made in that market of what they call managed threat detection and malware hunt, or managed threat hunting and stuff like that. And those are companies that actually sell services like that to other individuals, and you sign up for that. Because you can't have a developer team just sitting there scanning CVEs daily. Rather just outsource that to somebody and get updated. You tell them, this is my, but this is coming back to the threat log. This is my application threat log. This is what we run on. This is our dependencies, our, let's say, our runtime. Let's say if it's .NET or if it's Java or if it's Python or whatever. And you tell them, this is my footprint. They will just inform you, oh, here's updates, go look at it, go look at it, go look at it. And then you work that into your release cycle. But it's difficult. It's not easy, and it's gonna get even more tough. I mean, on Python, this month, 10.
I remember. I was going to say that actually.
The Slovakian National Cyber Authority reported to the Python repository managers 10 malicious packages that was using what a technical typo squatting, where they misspelled some of the packages slightly by adding or removing, like say, a letter. And people that don't know better, that might misspell it or just scan through a package list, select the wrong one, might install that malicious package. And you would be none the wiser. And as soon as you install the package would run its malware, its trigger code, there it goes off. Luckily, so far, it's only broadcasting out host information, but it's not doing something bad. But you would be none the wiser. If you're learning Python for the first time and you download the URL lib and you misspell one of the L's, like you just say URL, now all of a sudden you're pulling in a malicious package and you would be none the wiser.
Next minute it's in your requirements file.
So you have a problem, and that's why these things are. You have to pay quite close attention these days, especially, and that's where open source is a double-edged sword. not to say that Microsoft isn't, but
Well, the problem is that package management has always been a problem. I mean, Haroon here and Marcus Laviera have done multiple talks on it. Even cpickle, which is one of the standard lib in Python, is also quite dangerous. So, on the one hand, the language can be dangerous, the packages can be dangerous, the package maintainers might not know what the hell's going on. And that's where DevSecOps starts looking at like CI with something like a WASP Zap running in Jenkins with a preset bunch of scans it does. I mean, if, let's say it's an API, to test an API often is straightforward. Send out a bunch of requests, see the responses, same thing with a web application firewall. Go through every endpoint, try and hit every query parameter with a SQL injection, that kind of thing. So the due diligence will already catch a lot of those. And if you're a vendor, if you catch something quick enough, if you catch the 0 day, you upstream it as a GitHub issue or something, or you actually get the library to fix it.
no, it's important. Sorry to interrupt. Continue.
Yeah, no, and as an admin, I can tell you one thing. If you want happy clients, fix the stuff really quickly. Because I mean, as an admin myself, it is nightmarish when you have vulnerability. You've got then DevOps, your InfoSec department being on you, you need to say, patch this thing, but the vendor's not supplying. And you keep on chasing and chasing and chasing for weeks on end.
And
So-
you have to follow procedure.
Yeah, and you have to follow procedure at the same time. So, like I mean, within the organization, for example, like with myself, my manager gets shut on, his manager gets shut on, and so on and so on and so on. So this goes up to the CEO. So it gets quite messy. It makes a lot of people's lives nightmarish very quickly.
Can I ask another question? Like, what is the application doing? Not specifically, but in slightly general terms. Is it financial? Is it cat pictures? You know, that's a very different. So you mentioned threat. So you telecoms.
Yeah.
Not telecoms billing. Telecoms billing. Yeah. Okay. So. I suppose it also depends on your customers. I've worked in telecoms before, and we could actually patch some of the things. As in the vendor was, yes, you can patch the operating system. Yes, you can upgrade the database that you're using. And other ones were like, no, don't touch the system. And I've heard stories where the admins at the telco would be like, no, we really, really need to patch this. And eventually the vendor would be like, okay, tell you what, if you patch it, and then we'll help you test it to make sure it works. So you kind of like, you patch it, prove it works to us, and then we'll like sign off on it, and then that'll become a supported configuration. And they would have to do things like that. And that's what the gentleman here is also talking about. He doesn't want to really have to do that if he doesn't have to. He'd rather be like, oh, I'm allowed to apply the latest patches for the operating system as of this date. And you agree that it's fine. So.
It wasn't the French supply.
You're very perceptive there?
Good memory.
Yeah, I think it might have also been the American supplier.
We've known each other for a while.
It might have also been the American supplier as well, as I recall. It seemed to be a bit of a common problem. Like, here's your black box, live with it, you know. And it's like, well. And then just one general comment, because you mentioned legacy applications for which maybe there are no patches available because it's so old. And you're almost talking about it's a black box. So again, it's really not maintainable. That would probably be the place where I'd really like to have that system hardened down, maybe not air gapped because that's a bit extreme, but maybe with a host-based firewall, or maybe not, if you can't do that, even a firewall to prevent everybody, Tom, Dick, and Harry, from accessing that box, etc., etc. You know, you sometimes have to go, okay, we can't patch this thing, so what do we do about it? So if it's a black box, they expect security, and they do penetration tests against the application. It's got nothing to do with billing, and they're that anal about it already. So I'm almost surprised your customers aren't telling you that you will patch this for it. You will supply us with patches which include security patches. So yeah, it really depends on what your customers want. How sensitive is it? What is it hooking to? Can it be isolated? You know, like if it's a planning, forecasting tool that runs on somebody's PC, it's probably not a big problem, right? If it's the thing plugging into the billing system, if it's the thing that does, I mean, I've worked with systems which talk to various chain, or like the chain across the, as you know, the calls flow in and the tickets are created, and how like the UMA files and things like that, and where it tells you what the records of how long this phone was talking on this network, and therefore you can bill them. And making sure that, oh, we have a record of it here, and we actually build the custom over there all the way through. We don't like start with 10 of these and we only build 5 of them. So it's very interesting software out there. So depends on how sensitive it is. Talk to your customer. Oh, and bill them for it. That was what I wanted to say. No, seriously, it is a support service. It's a value-added service. They should have a support contract for it. Like, otherwise, it's a lot of work, and it can completely, change a profitable business to a non-profitable business, because you've got to be realistic about this.
I think back to the libraries and supporting things, what helps us, especially in the US and Europe, PCI DSS, FedRAMP,
People.
all of these kind of force companies to even think about it in the first place. So management already thinks about it, and then if you can bring it into the process. So I always use this example. I think it's Coinbase that I was talk in London, where they have security as part of their life cycle. So after code's been submitted, security has to look at it. They look at all software that goes out into production, and no one can actually SSH into a box and do anything. It has to go through essentially a DevSecOps process. So Dev Security Ops Art. So no one lives in a perfect world. If I told you our systems are perfectly secure, please remove me from the what's
No, we'll just take the beers away from you. We'll be like,
Yeah, but the scary thing is there's always ways and means for people to find holes in your model. I mean, there's a recent talk that somebody gave about they found a security company that ordered the client. The client said, no, we had air gaps all over the place. There's no ways they could have leaked the credentials. And they found out that their IP cameras that monitored the environment that was air gapped from the rest of the organization, that actually issued the credentials and managed all the CAs and all the stuff, actually had infrared capabilities. So the guys used the infrared capabilities on the cameras to observe what the guys were typing, and using that to air gap the information out.
Yeah, bridge the air gap.
Yeah. So it is ridiculous of what you can achieve if you just look at certain things. But
so in that case, you're talking about CA, like certificate authorities.
Stuff like that, yeah. So in other words, to issue credential, not necessarily CA, but let's call it just credential issuance. So no matter how good your security is, if there's some small weak part, you can get breached. But
you've also brought up several times now about knowing your threat landscape and your threat actors, and where are your the points in your kill chain that are going to get you into trouble. So it sounds like we should have had an enterprise security talk before this.
But then coming back to
help.
your 0-day question or your 0-day statement, there's also a market for that. And I think you touched it on the NSA stuff, but that's just, let's say, nation state. I mean, the Zerodium currently recently launched their new, let's call it, shopping basket for a remote jailbreak on an iOS device. They're prepared for, it's basically just a remote access to it's I think $1.5 million.
Yeah, I've heard of,
So for that type of money, if you have that type of vulnerability, that's what you can go shop around for. There are others on the list for various platforms, but there's a marketplace for them. So why would you disclose the 0 days if you can profit from it? So there's where the lack of ethics probably is a different, human factor, but there's a market for that, and we could be coming into a place where
it's literally a black market, right?
Yeah,
like the traditional understanding of it is like
depends on who buys more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Stuxnet, they say had how many 0 days in it, and that was only obtained through let's say not illegitimate means. So government agencies apparently bought 0 days at whatever the price was back then. And to pull that off, you need to understand a lot of aspects of the system you're attacking. To have four different 0 day payloads. And coming in now
it was a very targeted attack.
So if you look at it like these days, you don't even need to do 0 days. I mean, just WannaCry, for instance. Was it WannaCry? sorry, not WannaCry. What is the one that hit Medoc, the guys in Ukraine?
Not Picture.
Not Picture. Yeah, not Picture. So that wasn't even a 0 day. They just use, like, even though recently with Avast and CCT. So it's like you infiltrate the supply chain.
Correct. So
And
way to
you
seed
don't have
your
to do, you don't have
malware.
to do 0 days. Okay? So 0 days becoming less sexy. You just it's easier to get to the supply chain.
Well, it's path of least resistance, right?
Yes.
And Medoc had been warned several times by the Ukrainian government to sort their nonsense out before that.
Yeah.
So, not really the biggest surprise when you start going behind the scenes and reading up and getting the history. Then you're like, yeah, this was just waiting to happen, and then it happened. And then, what was the name you mentioned recently? I heard of another company that's just been used to like push out a whole lot
The
of.
CC Cleaner. So it was the guys at
Yeah.
Avast that acquired a company called Prereform. Yeah. Yeah, Prereform. And that company had a problem where one of the versions of Avast, I think was 32-bit version or something. Not Avast, CC Cleaner.
CC Cleaner.
5.3.3.6.162.
That one had a backdoor implant.
It was
That
only
was signed.
32-bit.
Sorry?
Only on 32 bits.
Yeah, only 32-bit, and it was signed.
Mm.
Legitimate code signing certificate was used, and it was distributed for a short while. And yeah,
2.3 million downloads.
Very popular piece of software.
yeah, administrators typically use that. They instruct their clients or their users to use it, or they even use it. So it was probably running with escalated or elevated privileges. So
It has to. Yeah, those like registry tweaks and stuff like that.
yeah, so it's a delicate thing. So your problem comes in with 0 days is that also a 0 day? I don't know. It's probably not. It's just a different way of getting into the
Becoming more prominent.
It's just
It has the same effect.
Are you saying a board 0 day or just one of those CC Cleaner 0 days? Like we were talking about Zerodium.
so Zerodium is actually when you sell your.
Yeah, but technically, wouldn't it still be a 0 day because
No,
the public doesn't know?
That's correct. And
I'm
the vendor specifically doesn't
extrapolating
know about it. It
Liam's
can't be
theory
patched.
here. Or Liam's thesis about a 0 day. Is it like the config or weak passwords, or is this even? Has this the same effect as a 0
So
day?
there's even another one. The NSA and CIA actively putting 0 days into software.
No, they're asking. I mean, the ISO recently
What
rejected
weakening standards?
crypto.
Yeah.
Exactly, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Before that firewall company that had a backdoor in debug, the debug
Blue
message.
Code? Is it Blue Code that also?
No, it wasn't them, it was someone else. Big firewall company. And when they went through the Git servers, they couldn't track which user actually did the Git commit.
So there's no proof of code review or even.
But yes, it was interesting with the latest ISO standard. That was the low power versions of encryption or something like that. And they dropped the weakest ones, kept the stronger one, and then Japan, Germany, and Israel still said no, we don't like this. Which makes me wonder, what do those three countries know that the rest of us don't? The NSA has proposed standards. There we go.
Yeah, they were saying with the CC Cleaner that the malicious DLL injection was done most likely on the build machine. Because I don't think it was in the repository.
It was done from the actual machine that built it.
Yeah.
Makes a certain amount of sense. Specifically based on, we couldn't find it in our repo who committed it. Like, well, it wasn't in the repo, so.
Yeah.
Or Windows allowing DLLs to load other DLLs.
Yeah, it was
Load
interesting.
code on
But
runtime.
the thing is, when you install an update of your most popular and 14-year-old trusted software, and it asks for elevated permissions because it's doing an install, you expect it. You answer yes. Goodbye. Thanks for playing.
But that's also the problem with Windows. There's an inherent knowledge that when you're typing in a password on Linux and you're installing something or escalating the privileges that you're doing something, on Windows you're kind of like, I'm busy, just
Yeah.
go away.
Run as a
My worst part is like you're actually working on an area that window just pops up and you also happen to click on that thing and it's going to just insert itself. What did I just agree to? It's like you don't know, and that actually for me is even a bigger flaw. It's like when we have security requirement pop in your face, but it just quickly glosses over and you don't know what you agreed to.
Or you're busy typing something and you finish your line and you hit enter, just as the security warning pops up, defaulting to yes.
There was, I think it was Windows 98, they had a brilliant feature which you could set so that it automatically moves the mouse to the OK button if anything pops up.
Sounds like they just made that default, eh?
Sounds like Microsoft to me.
So you mentioned that the CC cleaner was on the, they suspect it's on the Vault server?
On the Vault server.
Or they've confirmed it is on the Vault server?
Last I read was that it was suspected to be on the Vault server, because I couldn't see it in the replay.
Okay.
Also what they saw is the the debug symbols was included with the shipping version, which was also strange because that was not normal behavior.
So if I think it's the people who make CC cleaning's responsibility to try and secure that, so Avast in this case. But
Periform.
But anyway, whoever it is who actually owns that build process, you can have another environment that's is secure, like you audit the heck out of it and whatever. And you can build it twice, you can compare it. So it's like checks and balances. So I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm not saying it's necessarily feasible for everybody. It's an interesting problem to think about, and then like how would you defend against it? And that's kind of what this whole talk has been about. It's like you've got 0 days and there's code that's going to come up. Well, in the code, and then there's going to be a patch, and there's going to be a time window, and you can't patch in that time. So that's almost like the same as there being a patch. It's a non-0 day. Same with the config issue. Same with the password issue. It's going to cause problems. What can you do to make your environment harder to break in the face of all these problems?
So I know for WannaCry, one of my customers, it came out late Friday afternoon. The InfoSec guys were already aware of it and working on it on the Saturday. And Monday, the Windows team got told, we've spoken to the CIO, we've got a waiver, you will start patching immediately. 1,200 servers later in 2 days.
Sure.
The businesses the application owners tend to balk at downtime.
Yeah.
Because it interrupts their work. But all the Windows team said was, CIO says we do it now. Thanks for playing. So you've got to get buy-in right from the top.
Yes, buy-in at the top will make
and it was an out-of-band patch.
Yeah, out of the normal patch cycle.
But see, that's the point. If you have laws like FedRAMP, the top's at least aware of it in the first place, so they can mandate it down. Where if you just trying to throw the ball up constantly and it keeps coming back down, you're just going to get tired.
You've got to have buy-in at sea level.
Well, with our company, they were forced to do so because what happened is they hired some pen testers. Lo and behold, like literally a good 80% of our internet-facing software was vulnerable completely. We were using Spring 1, for example, things like that. So CEO said literally, we're starting a project to clean everything up. And from this point onwards, if InfoSec says do, the whole company does. No questions asked.
That's the way to do it.
That's why with me, for example, as an admin, when InfoSec says listen, there is a patch, I literally have to be on standby that night. It's not a choice. It just has to happen.